into that top place. Michael Hamilton, age 28 from Indianapolis, playing with that 12-2 record.
Brian Lorenz, 11-3, just a notch below, but also really, really capable here. Both players playing very different styles of Icelander, frankly, and they're ready to rock and roll. Again, Michael Hamilton is the better seed here, so he will have the choice. Do you go first or do you go second? And in this case, you're going first if you're Michael Hamilton. That seems to be the way to go. Now take a look at the equipment. This is something that actually Tannen said, hey, take a look at the equipment. It might seem a little different, and as you can see, different headpiece, different chest piece.
Yeah, Alluvian Constellus is one of those cards that when you bring that in, you are looking to activate like Arcane Barrier as much as possible, and including using that Alluvian Constellus so that you can set up for easy Waning Moon turns, because it essentially, after you've built up 2 counters or more onto Alluvian Constellus, you are able to remove 2 energy counters from it and then basically make your staff free, even through the attacks of a Frostbite. It is an incredibly powerful tool to essentially act kind of like what Tunic does oftentimes and give you like a free extra action by using the Tunic resource, except in this case, you're using this to basically make your Waning Moon come across for free.
Bonus as well, Arcane Barrier 1.
Yep, and that is how you do it, because you can only stack up those tokens by actually using the Arcane Barrier on Alluvian Constellus, because it's the first time that Alluvian Constellus prevents arcane damage. Do you actually get that token?
All right, we're ready to rock and roll again. This one's going to be a very turbulent match. It's going to be hard to figure out who the hell's turn it is, let alone who's in the lead here, because, again, life totals, it's all just an illusion, Michael.
I do appreciate the use of the Null Rune Hood here to really just go max protect as far as Arcane Barrier equipment is concerned. He has, I mean, when all is said and done, that Null Rune Hood, plus the Alluvian Constellus, plus the Metacarpus node, plus the AB2 on the boots, adds up to a grand total of 5, which means he can stop literally everything except like a crazy fused freezing point.
Or like a meteor that should hit the convention center.
That too, yes.
Listen, if you want to cover your bases, Steven, we're going to cover our bases here, okay?
Well, I don't think those cards are going to stop that. But anyway, we have the Aether Ice Vein fused here, and this is exactly why you have this setup. Now, if that's a red Aether Ice Vein fused, then this pushes 5, and Michael Hamilton can say, yeah, I'm just going to stop all 5. But I think it's just a blue.
All right, so that is a cold snap.
Yeah, it's the old cold snap. Now, it's going to draw him a card, but it also does have an effect. In this instance, it has 0 effect because you can't really freeze an arsenaled card if they don't have it. Nevertheless, it does cycle, give a Frostbite, and arsenal a card. This, what they just did, I love it so much. They are stacking their cards in the order that they are going to resolve. And that is huge.
I was going to say that the stack is going to be an incredibly important element to this game, and the order in which things are resolved and responded to, that is part of the very intricate accounting in terms of making sure that you are playing the cards at the right time. It's not just about, you know, start of turn, action phase, end phase, past turn. There are so many little nooks and crannies that you can sneak damage into here. So being aware of where things are on the stack is going to be important. And here the first thing is, all right, Frostbite will resolve. We're going to get the cold snap done. And now finally the Aether Ice Vein is what is resolving, which I believe he just went ahead and completely full blocked.
Yeah, it was indeed a red Aether Ice Vein for 5, and he had 2 floating, pitched a blue, added a counter to the Alluvian Constellus, and said, yeah, you don't get to deal me damage because I have AB5. Arcane Barrier 5 really coming in handy here on the first full turn of the game.
Michael Hamilton is going to open with, there it is. That is a Finals Fighting Spirit, 7 for 3. This is where the 2 decks are very different. Michael Hamilton is packing a lot of punch as well.
Yeah, wildly different because he's choosing, and look, it's spin it around and take a look. Normally when you see a Fjandal's Fighting Spirit in a deck list for Icelander, you're like, cool, they're just running that in the sideboard for, you know, like a Dromai matchup so that you have poppers for Illusionist Phantasm attacks. But Michael says, no, I'm just going to throw 7 at your face, and then you decide how to deal with it.
And you can see here Brian kind of just considering, all right, well, what's the hell's going on here? That's a 7. He's discussing in terms of when the game text might resolve. Because if there is, in fact, a resolution here, or rather a response here. Let's say Brian goes and plays out of Arsenal and does arcane damage. The question here, I believe, that they're trying to sort out is the game text resolved now upon presentation, or if he resolves and lowers the health total of Michael, will the game text then come online? That, I think, is what the discussion is here.
And that, I believe, is actually going to be the case. This is a card that has been played but not resolved, because if you respond to the playing of this card, just like with any sort of wizard interaction, I believe that if you respond to the playing of this card, then you would then complete the game text at that point. So let's see if he chooses to let that resolve, and he is going to choose to let that resolve, which means, nope, he is going to choose to respond to that.
A Frostbite comes through off of the Amulet of Ice. Free play out of Arsenal, giving a Frostbite to Michael, but most of the damage is already presented. Again, we're talking about Icelander and all of her magic tricks that she can toss out there, but at the end of the day, the initial attack has been presented, and that still has to be accounted for.
He's going to prevent that damage with a blue pitch card from the hand and gain the counter. And again, now he's at 2 counters. And this is a great little block. He's going to block and then Oasis Respite to stop that damage. But gaining the counters and putting yourself to 2 means Waning Moon is free. If you arsenal a card and then play a non-attack on your opponent's turn, you can come in for free.
I think keeping track of the value in which Luvian Constellus represents in this particular matchup versus the Tunic, that is something to keep track of. The Tunic is going to give you 1 resource every 3 turns, but the Luvian Constellus it's potentially going to give you 3 resources every 2 turns.
Yes, yeah, you can think of it that way, as something like 3 resources every 2 to 3 turns, depending on how disruptive or damaging your opponent plays this in this mirror matchup, because that really does change things. And giving the opportunity to respond or go through any of the motions, you could always do something like a Storm Striders on your opponent's turn, but instead, just going to draw up and pass. Michael Hamilton says, go ahead, and I will play out this Aether Ice Vein.
That is an Aether Ice Vein. Is that?
Looks blue.
Blue to me.
So a little tough to see, but it does look blue.
Aether Ice Vein blue is going to come in for 3 arcane damage. It is fused, meaning that on hit, if any of that arcane damage does leak through, discard or pay 2. These disruption effects are going to be pretty important. However, in the mirror, there's always responses to the triggers.
Yes, you can always respond to things. Even in damage resolution, you can try to respond in different ways to allow you to play out cards that you would otherwise normally not. He does have Arcane Barrier 3 off of Metacarpus Node and Storm Striders, so he's able to stop an a blue here, the Aether Ice Vein blue, without worrying too much by just simply pitching a blue.
So much thought processes going through both of these players' minds. This is a very, it's a very cumbersome matchup, but there's so much to consider, so much timing that you need to be precise on. If you're not accurate with your when to play your cards, if you're not aware of what the potential is, both players have gone through a couple turns by now, and it's still 36 to 36. So do these matchups typically, this isn't like a Kano mirror where, they're both trying to burn each other to the ground. This is a little bit more of a grindier game of attrition. Is this game, in these matchups, if there was a 50-minute time limit, do you think that these matchups are usually threatening to potentially go to time?
Not necessarily, because this one plays out similarly in a lot of ways to the way Kano mirrors play out. From my experience of playing Kano mirrors and playing Icelander mirrors, you're both trying to find the chip damage. But I would say that this is fundamentally different because Michael Hamilton's deck is fundamentally different. It can throw big attacks at random when you may not be expecting it, and you may not be able to tax them before they do it. They just slam down a 7 and make a lot of headway that way.
Another Ice Amulet.
Yeah, I also want to point this out. Some great sportsmanship from Michael, realizing that they had accidentally cleared the board state of the Ice Amulet from a previous turn, and understanding that had never been triggered, that it was simply just moved over to the side on accident and then putting it back out into the field, so he has access to it. And slamming down a Frost Hex, giving that to Michael.
Both players have a deck that is essentially built on the cornerstone pitch value of blue. Blue is going to be an important element. It is the lion's share of the cards here. I mean, Michael Hamilton also has his fair share of aggression in the red pitch column here, but ultimately, when it comes down to actually converting for damage, the amount of AB, the amount of blue pitch, it's going to be incredibly difficult and slow moving, I feel. It's going to be going at like a glacier's pace here to actually push through and find those big turns. Without something like, I think the advantage here on Michael Hamilton's side is the fact that he can just present a 7 and start buying cards.
Say, hey, Wounded Bull, here's Wounded Bull, deal with that. Here on responding to the Frost Hex, he plays Emeritus Scolding, which is incredibly powerful on your opponent's turn because it gains +2 damage, pushes for 4, and then he comes across with the Waning Moon for 3 as well. So pushing 7 damage on your opponent's turn is nothing to scoff at.
I will not scoff because I still am not 100% accurate or clear on what scoffing is. Oh, is that a scoff?
Yes.
Okay. I have been, see, again, I learn something every single time. The day that I do not learn something when I'm casting you, Steven Armada, that's happening. I will just walk away. And
You'll
then
scoff.
I will scoff, leave, then come back for my next matchup.
Ooh, drawing into a freezing point alongside of another Oasis Respite. He's drawn into those oases. I believe that's the plural. Oases. Write that down. I don't know.
I will not write it down.
You need to learn something, though, right? Drawing into another one, allowing you to kind of set those aside or even arsenal those and respond to something giant like a Wounded Bull. Those are key cards in this matchup, I feel.
Big-time cards. Again, the fact that you can just toss physical damage alongside, and Michael Hamilton's brew is very unique. The Icelander matchup here, the fact that he's the 2nd seed is, not necessarily simply because Michael Hamilton is an exceptional world-class player, but his deck designs as well have always changed the dynamic from tournament to tournament. I believe it was in Indianapolis, if possible, when at the calling way back when, where his brew was completely different. He took a very patient approach with Starvo in that. He took a very slow, grindy approach where everybody else was just swinging for the fences. Michael Hamilton played very well in that tournament, again, changing the game. And here's another way that he takes what people think Icelander looks like and how she should play and just completely turns it upside down.
Yeah, 100%. And giving a Frostbite at instant speed by playing that Polar Blast. Polar Blast itself isn't really going to have the effect, but it is going to have the effect of being played from Arsenal and drawing a card. This was a card that people jumped on pretty early when Icelander was first released in a Blitz, and you could play this and sort of have that card draw. Kind of got moved away from when we got all of those great ice cards in Uprising. Now back in the fold in several different lists, and here it is in Michael's list as well, using Alluvian Constellus along with some other stuff to stop the damage there.
Alluvian Constellus has not yet been used, but again, it's a card of opportunity. There will be certain situations where perhaps you're just out of cards. You can go ahead and trigger the Alluvian Constellus, get a free Waning Moon when necessary. But slowly but surely, this will get resolved, as right now, after 3-4 turns, only 3 damage has leaked through, and that has been on the receiving end of Brian Lorenz.
Yeah, these players, I think, are running into situations, and particularly Michael is able to, because he brought Arcane Barrier 5, he's able to stem the tide very easily, and he's taking the position of almost playing turtley and controlling and defensively and stopping damage that could be coming in and trying to prevent this leak of damage. Now, that could be a fine take because he may just be playing out for, just easy chip Waning Moon damage and find those big attacks. But it also gives time for Brian to find Frost Hexes, and that is very dangerous against every matchup. He's got an energy pot in hand, the sink below that doesn't have as much utility right now unless a giant attack is thrown.
I'm gonna sit back a little bit here. I'm gonna get comfortable. I think that this isn't like that Brody Spurlock, balls to the walls, let's just trade damage kind of game. This is a
for sure
grindier chess match that It's going to take a while. There again, I want to let everyone know that in the top 8 there are no draws, there is no clock. The clock you see is ticking upwards, onward and forward, forward not backward, upward not forward,
Oh,
and always spinning and spinning.
There's another Frost Hex played down, and this again kind of harkens back to what I was just saying about taking the defensive role from Michael Hamilton. I expected him to maybe dig for those wounded bulls or try to throw damage in a little bit more, I don't want to say reckless of fashion because I feel like he's always very calculated, but more calculated, just giant attacks and pushing those extra damages. And look, they're trading. You get a Frost Hex, you get a Frost Hex. Everybody gets a Frost Hex. It looks like with this positioning, this game is going to slow down a good bit.
It is certainly going to slow down a good bit. We also got a Frost Hex based off the trades that we were making earlier.
We did. We actually traded into a cold foil Frost Hex and then traded out of that.
I think we got a graded 9 Japanese Gengar.
I don't even know what that is.
That is a Pokemon.
No, I don't think so.
It was definitely not a Pokemon. Either way, the Frost Hexes are littering the field. You see the auras that are just living on the board too of the Amulet of Ices alongside a Frost Hex as well. Now keep in mind that Frost Hex that's on Brian's side. That is Michael's Frost Hex. The 2 Frost Hexes on Michael's side, those are Brian's Frost Hexes. It's just this gigantic jamboree of both players singing Ice Kumbaya and just trading all of the frosty goodness.
They're trying to figure out the best way to organize the board state, because when I have some Amulets of Ice and I've given you 2 of my cards from my deck, where are you going to put those? And then here's my Frost Hex that you're giving me, and now I also have a Frostbite. Let me pay through that Frostbite really quick. What do you do with the board state? It's kind of like that Jacob Baugh match where he's got 14,000 items on the field, and then he's like doing accounting.
Yeah, you got to just, again, remember our degenerate gambler squirrel?
Yes, I do.
He's back. We still have a name for him.
If you do not know what we're talking about, just watch the VODs. Just watch yesterday and the day before. It was a great time.
Yeah, we're not just going to walk you through this. You got to put some work in. There's another Frost Hex, though.
And you get a Frost Hex, and you get a Frost Hex, and you may get an Alluvian Constellus counter.
All right, so with these on the board, we know how the Frost Hexes will factor into later grindier games against certain decks where eventually the payoff is dumping a crap ton of Frostbites against your opponent. They'll eventually stack, factor in, the arcane damage just really, really piles on. In this matchup, is it the same end game here?
Well, it can be, and it looks like both players have taken the posture of making that a reality. And you're looking at Brian's hand here, and we see there's an Insidious Chill there. If he can establish that down as well, perhaps on Michael's turn, then he can really set up with this this game plan of absolutely clearing out your opponent's hand so that they can't stop the Frostbite damage that comes from Frost Hexes. And that looks like what both players are actually playing for.
I just want to remind everyone this is not a deck check. Even though all their cards are on the table, stacked so neatly, this is not a deck check. This is just a lot of permanents that are just living on the board.
He's going to tick up that Alluvian Constellus using the effect of Arcane Barrier to go to 4 tokens. And the judge is going to read and make sure that you can go to 4, and 4 is the max that you can put on Alluvian Constellus, and then you can pull 2 off and fire away your Waning Moon whenever you see fit, which is great.
I like a lot of these cards. Like, I mean, Tunic was, I guess, the OG when it comes to just dropping counters on it and getting value. Alluvian Constellus is another one. Ghostly Touch is a very cool one as well. There's no ceiling on Ghostly Touch.
Oh, hey, look. Alluvian Constellus fires off for 2.
Kablamo! And that's a free swing, baby.
I do love, and this is good usage because you're going to eventually move to the opponent's turn, and you want to be able to, since you don't have an arsenal here, you want to be able to at least get some of those counters off so that when you draw up, you have the ability to gain more counters. So you're basically just playing with that action economy. It's kind of like taking the Tunic resource right before you move off into the next Tunic counter going up.
Now, is that Alluvian Constellus, or is that the playbill for Jesus and the Technicolor Dreamcoat?
That's a great question.
I'm just
Joseph, right? Joseph.
Was it Joseph?
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever. Someone had a Technicolor Dreamcoat.
That is true. That honestly is some amazing art done by Carlos Cruchaga, who has done art for a bunch of cards, including that really cool key art from Monarch. Do you remember that like Angels versus Demons art that they used? He did that. It was incredible.
Monarch has some of the most stunning visuals, I think, when it comes to the artwork, and the foils on those cards are beautiful as well.
He also did the art for Gorganian Tome.
Oh, wow.
That tome just opening up. Really great artist.
The Coronet Peak here is being activated again. It's a pitch for 3 that basically asks your opponent to pay or discard. I do see a Heart of Fyendel in there, and that can be pitched for a free life as well. But opting in this case, we're going to pitch the Amulet Device, 2 floatings to satisfy the Coronet Peak.
Yep. And after that, it's just going to be a consideration of what you're going to do. Looks like he's going to pitch. No, he's just going to move on past. He doesn't have an arsenal, so he can't really play on his opponent's turn unless he cracks the boots, which is not really something you want to do at these high life totals. It doesn't really serve you well unless you're basically trying to speed run into playing all the items from your deck, which is kind of what these players are doing.
All right, so Michael Hamilton is currently on a 1 damage per 7-minute pace. So if we extrapolate that based on the life total that's left, we will have a resolution to this tomorrow. However,
someone bring us lunch and dinner, please. Please.
Oh, are we going to have another beef torpedo moment?
Goodness gracious. Hey, look, there is a Nourishing Emptiness in the hand of Brian, and that is a card that literally cannot be stopped based on the equipment that has been brought by Michael. So he's actually going to get a 5-card hand if he chooses to play that.
No, that's a great point for that, is that unless you have any way to deal with it. But
oh, just kidding. Never mind.
Yeah.
Scratch all of that because he has a Oasis Respite, a card that has come out in Uprising and taken the entire meta by storm.
No.
Just kidding. He doesn't have an Oasis Respite. That was in the graveyard.
Yeah, look at all this. Everybody's just going through everybody else's stuff. It's like this actually looked like our trade table not too long ago.
You're not wrong.
It was actually our trade table. It's like, here's what we got. Both players looking through everyone's pile. What do you have? What do I have?
Let's make a trade.
All right, so again, we're still at the 7 minutes per 1 damage clip here as Michael Hamilton is slowly busting through. But again, when it comes to advantages, you know, the fact that Michael Hamilton has actual physical attacks, and that will buy cards out of Brian Lorenz's hand. You know, we have the 3 Scarfur Scars, the 3 Wounded Bulls, the 4 Fyendal's Fighting Spirits, 3 Enlightened Strikes. So there is some jam in this toast. I'm running out of stuff. I know, I'm running out.
I gotta say too, this is a good. I think he full covers this here because he uses. Nope, he's gonna bleed 1. Did he actually bleed 1 here and not pitch a card? So that would force a card, since that has been fused. It is going to force a pitch of 2 or a discard, I believe.
All right, so we've gone up in life.
So he covered with Oasis Respite for 4, choosing not to Arcane Barrier, perhaps? Or I could be wrong and have missed something in the whirlwind of item play and graveyard check.
The Heart of Fyendel, a wonderful card. Again, I have opened so many boxes of Flesh and Blood in my life. I've never pulled a single Fable. But this card, it's a Fable, right? So, you know, it's a very desired card purely from the rarity, the iconic, you know, status of the card. But we've seen it a lot more now that the meta has sort of shifted towards control, seeing second and even third cycles of your cards. This is a card that has a lot more value now. It's a lot more appealing to have.
Yep, because it gains you 3 resources, which is fantastic in a deck like this where everything is based around your blue pitch, right? But it also gives you the option of life gain if you are able to set yourself up for a lower life total. You can start bringing yourself back up. And he is going to resolve the trigger there and discard a Sink Below, a card that could technically actually function well to stop like a big Wounded Bull or something like that, which we haven't seen thus far. So maybe Michael said, I'm just going to play the more conventional route, pull this out. I have AB5, I have Eluvian Constellus. I win the long game because I get more value.
Brian Lorenz holding on to the Nourishing Emptiness again, probably, other than the Command and Conquers, I think. Does he even have Command and Conquers? Yeah, 3 Command and Conquers, but you're probably not putting those in this list, in this matchup, I think, because of the fact that you can just play out of Arsenal at instant speed. It doesn't matter. So I think Nourishing Emptiness might be the only attack, and here we see it. It's going to be pitching for 2, 1 floating. Nourishing Emptiness says if you have no other attack actions in your graveyard, this gets Dominate and on hit +1 intellect. There's not many cards out there that increase your intellect.
Yeah. pushing 6 here, very difficult block if you don't have some tricks. You can only throw 1 card in front of this, and you don't have the equipment to add block to it, so you're not getting block there, which means this is guaranteed to give you +1 intellect, meaning you're drawing to 5. That plus an arsenal means you get to play a 6-card hand, and you might be able to set up some very, very scary turns with that.
A very desired card, you know, in the after Monarch. When it comes to dealing with Prism, finding the 6s, you know, it was a very good sideboard card. You'd have the Command and Conquers. Very, very useful, powerful cards. But Nourishing Emptiness was always a sideboard option for people who wanted to play against Phantasm. So that kind of has gone the wayside from a Race Face. Seems to have replaced it in that regard.
Well, you can actually do some really cool stuff with Nourishing Emptiness still. Like if you are playing as a wizard, like a Kano, for example, or an Icelander, and you're going into these control matchups. Icelander has a tool already in Frost Hex to deal with that, but Kano, into those really tough matchups, could do some weird stuff, like play a Time Snap Potion, and then pop the Time Snap Potion, play a Nourishing Emptiness from your arsenal, and pitch for it, and then play a Nourishing Emptiness from hand without breaking the chain. And if both of them hit with Dominate, you actually have 6 intellect. And so that is actually a combo that you can play into control decks if you set that up, if they give you the time to set up. It's a very, very cool card, and one that still has fringe cases like that.
That's pretty sweet, considering that I have the intellect of a 6-year-old.
Well, there you go. Then it would match. It's perfect.
I already forgot what you said.
What are we talking about?
Not sure. But
well, it's Brian's. Brian draws up. He was able to draw to 5 there and passes over to Michael. Michael with 2 Amulets of Ice, 2 Frost Hexes played on him. Brian with 2 Amulets of Ice, an Energy Potion, and 2 Frost Hexes played on him. It's like when both of you are standing, you know, across from each other, high noon, just waiting for someone to pull the trigger as far as who's going to play the first Frostbite generator. And then everything just goes crazy.
I wish you guys could have seen Steven looking deep into my soul with like his hands next to his hips like he was ready to go for the 6-shooter there. But you're right. Both players here are literally like setting up shop, selling potions like it's the Legend of Zelda. Like, what's going on here? This is quite fascinating. And you have to think, Steven, at some point this is going to come to blows. Like, it's been a very slow-moving game. And eventually resources are going to dwindle, and there's going to be situations where one of the 2 players is going to have to just take it on the chin.
Well, I mean, with a 5-card hand, and I do see an Ice Eternal in the hand, if you're able to set up a card, and look at this, I think he just Arsenal passes. Afraid of what possible crackback when you only have a 2-card hand. This is something that happens a lot in Wizard mirrors, by the way, especially like Kano mirrors. You would think it would just be like, you die, then I die, then you die, then it's over. But it's actually very measured, and you take a very measured approach when both players know what's going on, because it's like if I have a 2-card hand and both of them are blues, then I have to basically just pass because I could die if I don't. And so this happens a lot.
Every Kano match I've ever played, usually it's like on turn 2, I just sit back and bust out the popcorn like I'm a passenger. And while the Kano player does everything, and like midway through, it's like that Netflix screen or like, are you still watching? Yes or no? And I'm like, yes. And then they continue with their nonsense. And that's how all of my Kano experiences have been. I've never done the mirror. I don't have the patience to learn something like Kano. Like you are, that's your thing. That's like Caleb Van Patten or Imagine Bay's thing. Like you guys are wizard masters, Alex Vore, for example. But that is something I am absolutely not for.
Here, Brian on his turn ticks up the Tunic and then throws an Ice Bolt, representing some arcane damage. Asking the question from Michael, do you want to prevent some of this? If you do, you're taking cards from your hand to do so. And in doing so, you may get some value on the Constella since that has no counters. But going to your turn, you may just have to continue to just play that pass game, because I've set up 2 Frost Hexes, and I can really juice up one of these Ice Eternals.
Now, when it comes down to the equipment, do you see an advantage on one or the 2 players? Obviously, Michael Hamilton has so much Arcane Barrier. He can cover up to 5. Are you leaning more towards the Coronet Peak Tunic combo, or are you looking more towards the Illuvian Constellus with the Null Rune Hood?
If I had to sit down in one of these positions at the start of a game, I would take the Alluvian Constellus pretty much every single time. But that's not to say that the Tunic doesn't provide you its own benefits, and particularly the Coronet Peak doesn't provide you its own benefits. It's just that in this matchup, when you can build up basically just like a free Waning Moon every few turns, it is very, very good. And the Null Rune Hood just allowing you to stop all Aether Ice Veins and just about everything in the deck except for a fused Freezing Point is very solid. And it basically allows you to play this back and forth matchup where you're on control until you find a Fyendel's Fighting Spirit and then you just chuck it at their face.
I kind of know why, when it comes to how LSS decides what cards get the cold foil treatment. Because, in the previous, or in Tales of Aria, the cold foils were the pulses. Yep. Right? And those are played and they're discarded, they're shuffled, whatever. These are a lot like Burn Them All, Frost Hex. These live on the board for a while, so you can kind of show them off a little bit.
You get to enjoy the experience as they sit there and threaten to kill your opponent. Here we have the Fyendel's Fighting Spirit representing that 7 damage, and both players on subsequent turns have pitched Ice Eternal, both to the bottom of the deck, saying that, hey, this game is going to go long, and that Ice Eternal we value on the second cycle, or the third cycle if we even get to that, of the deck so that we can really stack blues next to it, really get the fuse target set up, and basically push it for like 8, like X equals 8. And so double X equals 8 so that we could push like 4 or 5 Frostbites if we can get really crazy with it and try to really just end the game in one turn.
And we call this the Larry Fitzgerald of games because it's going to go long.
There you go. I love that.
Thank you.
I love that reference.
Thank you. It's my one and only ever football reference I will ever make in my entire life.
As a Canadian, you refer to that as hand egg.
Hand egg, indeed.
Yeah.
Canadian hand egg. Our hand eggs used to be so much bigger than your hand eggs. They were. True story, the CFL, the Canadian Football League, in like the late 90s, early 2000s, to drum up interest across the border, our entire marketing strategy was literally CFL, we have bigger balls.
That is
100%. Look it up. That's the truth.
I believe that. And of his own volition, choosing to block out completely that Fyendel's Fighting Spirit with the Oasis Respite plus the 1-card block, leaving him with 1 card himself, is Brian Lorenz. Maybe feeling a little discombobulated in this matchup, but probably doing okay. Both players, I feel like they're able to set up, and he's set up another potion here on the board and cycled around for that second cycle the Ice Eternal that you're looking to end the game with. Because if you find the third Frost Hex, establish that, make like a crazy amount of Frostbites, your opponent's just not going to be able to stop it.
This is the point in the game typically where my mom would bust in and say, clean your room. Look at all this nonsense on the floor. But, I mean, a lot of these auras are going to stick around. Afflictions such as the Ice Hex, things like the Ice Amulet, the items, and the energy potions as well. There's a Aether Hail, I believe.
Aether Hail, one of my favorite cards. I just love the economy of being able to pay 1 for Aether Hail. I think this is the blue Aether Hail, and then Waning Moon for 2 after the fact. It's just a wonderful, wonderful feeling. Took the Tunic resource, by the way. That's why he was representing that as 3, and then paid 2 of those to Arcane Barrier.
Michael Hamilton sliding in with the Waning Moon. You got to think that both players will eventually have to take stock in what is left in the deck. There's a lot of pitch. There's a lot of pitching and cards that get recycled. However, at the end of the day, it's more so the fact that eventually this game they're going to run out of resources, and as we peruse the list of wonderful words that have been donated to us by the wonderful viewers out there who are enjoying the broadcast, enjoying the high level play, you have thrown some words at us that I honestly thought was just some people smashing their forehead on a keyboard. But no, these are actual English words.
Typed with your own phalanges, able to send that to us on Twitter. I got there for you. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, that's you. That's a full assist to you, my friend.
And here is Ice Eternal being played for, I think it's literally just the value for X equals 2. And so it's going to threaten 1 arcane damage, 1 creation of a Frostbite. Of course, it was fused with that. I think that's a Polar Blast down there, flipped over as the fused target. And so this will actually threaten the creation of our first frostbite in a while.
Are the Ice Eternals what the energy potions are looking to connect with?
Generally, yes, and you want to stack those up and pop the energy potions, gain the extra resources, drop the Ice Eternal as high as you can, and push for as many frostbites that you can create as possible so that you can basically make it to where they can't pay through them, and then all of them deal damage if you can stack 2 or 3 of the Frost Hexes.
Continually just kind of, slowly and methodically, this game of attrition for both of these world-class players. Brian Lorenz at 26 life, the 6th seed here at the U.S. National Championships. This is the first round of the semifinals, friends. We're so happy to have you here watching this. The gameplay has been exquisite. The Oldhams are gone.
And look at this. We have a freezing point. I believe that has been fused now. Michael Hamilton looking at this. This is not something that you can stop, and this represents a bunch of damage. 7, it's not technically physical. This is 7 arcane, so you can't just chuck a couple cards in front of this. You have to have Arcane Barrier to stop this. He has Arcane Barrier 5, and yet this is representing 7 whole damage.
7 damage is the start of perhaps some bad news for Michael Hamilton. Again, packing the most Arcane Barrier out of both players with 5, but 7 just peaks up on top of that. There's no real way to block that otherwise. I'm taking a look right now at Michael Hamilton's list. There is no Oasis Respite to sort of clean this up if necessary. So ultimately, it's going to come down to connect. And finally, some of those cards from that stack, that house of cards, are starting to fall.
So then I believe we have a response to the play of the freezing point. I believe this is the Polar Blast that was arsenaled and gives another frostbite to Brian, who is sitting there looking over the board for a moment, interdigitated, fingers interlocked, wondering, well, I thought I presented 7 damage. And now you're sitting here giving me another frostbite. Now I have to consider this response. You are going to draw a card off of this. The frostbite resolves. The card draw resolves. Michael Hamilton still staring down 7, though, and draws into an energy potion, something he would want to establish. I think he also has what is that? I forgot the name of the aura that pulls. It's Insidious Chill. That's the one. Has an Insidious Chill in hand as well. You do want to establish that generally as well.
Prior to the previous game, actually, Brian and Tana were mentioning how the dash game was probably going to go the distance. It was going to be a long game. Meanwhile, Tannen's he's sitting by waiting for his next chance to cast some great Flesh and Blood. He's been sitting here patiently. He's gotten a head start on his taxes for next year. Brian Gottlieb has written 3 chapters of his memoir. So
yep.
Yeah, we're buckled in, baby.
Yeah, Michael is absolutely gobsmacked with this giant attack. He's trying to send 3 damage over, but figure out how is he going to deal. Because when all is said and done, you're going to need to resolve 7 damage towards you. What are you going to be left with at the end of that? And yes, I did just use gobsmacked in a sentence.
Oh, was that on the list?
Yes.
Oh, you legend. Absolute legend.
I just have it pulled up, and I'm just going to keep firing them.
Tannen in pure Tannen fashion is he's actually cycling through stats of a T-ball game in Korea somewhere because he's obsessed with baseball. So it doesn't matter where or when. He's just he just needs to see numbers. Love the guy to death, but that's an illness, my friend. Love him. Love him, love him. But hey, we're playing Flesh and Blood, which we love so much more. And there's so many ice afflictions on the board. Frost hexes galore, amulets. It looks like a crystal party. Like you're looking to have your chakras realigned with the amount of crystals that are on the board right now, friends.
By the way, if you're wondering why Freezing Point is actually pushing 7, what it's doing, because it was fused, is it's counting the number of frost hexes, the ice afflictions that your opponent has on their side of the board, and adding that to its damage. So it normally pushes for 5, but it is buffed up and pushing for 7, which is a great thing to do if you're trying to get over the AB5.
So Michael Hamilton does run 2 energy potions. I don't know if he's cycled into them yet. I don't know if we're at that point yet where we're at the second cycle. But if not, we are rapidly approaching it, if I'm not mistaken. We're at 39 minutes in this match have elapsed. Again, now if this was a Swiss round, both players would have 11 minutes to wrap this up and so much hill to climb.
And we have Michael Hamilton's first Wounded Bull sighting. Wounded Bull number 1 is in hand, ready to be fired away. Salvo number 1, deal with Wounded Bull. He's going to draw up here, is Brian.
I think this is what Michael Hamilton was waiting for. It's like, where are my big attacks? And there's the Wounded Bull, and that's going to come in for it's a standard 7, but it does potentially get a buff here.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have less life right now, so it's pushing 7. But you know, if like there's a response here, which I don't think he probably wants to do, to push this to 8, I think you probably just find a way to deal with this first. And then at the end of it all, oh, you're settling in. Oh, my goodness. As I'm describing this in true professional manner, Flake grabs the handle on the side of these wonderful, perfect Secret Labs Legend Story Studios chairs, and he just collapses back, settling in fully.
This is how we're doing it, baby.
Okay, I'm just going to join you because
come on back, baby.
It's too good. It's too good.
Icelander mirrors
drop down.
Are the way to go. You thought Oldham fatigue was a thing. Buckle up, baby.
All right, so he is going to try and deal with this, but he's making some instant plays here.
So 7 on the stack again. Now, the question here is, let's say Brian does respond and does trickle damage through here. That 7 becomes an 8.
That's exactly right, and that's why you really want to consider. And look, he's drawn into. Brian has 2 different Ice Eternals, which is honestly pretty crazy. The Ice Eternals in your hand at this point allow for some crazy plays.
Waning Moon is potentially the response here, and if the trade up here is that you're going to deal 3 while the Wounded Bull goes up to 8, that's fine. You're dealing 3 to take the 2. This is damage that maybe Michael's not going to fully block. Maybe you block 2.
Yeah, you can definitely consider that, but he is going to fully block it, go AB3, get another counter on the Constellus, which is actually great because it allows you to pull those 2 counters off on your opponent's turn. You do have 1 card left in hand, which is perfect for this turn sequence because you can arsenal it, play it on your opponent's turn, and then Alluvian Constellus.
We are approaching cricket match territory for this one. I'm telling you, tea time will occur at the 60-minute mark, but we're still plenty of action here. And what I think needs to be driven home to those of you who may not have as many reps, or any reps rather, on a control mirror like this, this is not an easy matchup to navigate for either one of these players, given the fact that there's, let's say you play, a Rhinar versus a Dorinthia. You know that when it's your turn, you have the full runway. You've got clearance for landing. In this case, there are all kinds of threats that are buzzing around.
I mean, look at the board. I mean, the board is mostly obfuscated. I tried to use it. I almost got away with saying it just smoothly, but it is. The board is so unintelligible if you're not sure what's going on and what all of these pieces are doing. It is obfuscated. You're welcome, Jessica.
Hold on. Are people actually giving us the definitions with the words that they're tweeting at us?
I know that one.
Okay, well, pardon me.
I know. It's inconceivable that I would know all of these
sorry.
things. You're welcome, Jeremy. Inconceivable.
Steven, you strike me as the person who applauds when a plane lands. How dare you?
That hurt me to my core.
Sorry.
Oh, what a repugnant comment you made just now.
Well, I don't even know what that is.
I can understand that.
7 is still left to be accounted for, ladies and gentlemen. Wounded Bull, a card that is in your bulk pile, I promise you. You will see this card once upon a time, all the way from Welcome to Wraith. There it is, a 7 for 3 with the bonus that, hey, if you are less life total than your opponent, that comes in for 8. An 8 for 3. Now, Icelander obviously usually has this online against most other opponents because she starts at 36. Yeah,
so here, ending up just choosing to take it all, and sometimes when you look at, from the Icelander perspective, sometimes you just have to take a bunch of damage so that you can set up an actual big turn. Something like an Aether Ice Vein usually is why you end up taking this. Or you can play your own turn Ice Eternal as well to set up, and that looks like that's what he's going to go for, is his own turn Ice Eternal to give Frostbites, force out some things. And that's, when you have 2 Ice Eternals, you can make this type of play where you don't fuse Ice Eternal, you just look to create Frostbites, and then you arsenal the other one. And then when they try to pay through the Frostbites on their turn, you create more Frostbites on top of it, and then they're really stuck.
That's mean.
Repugnant, some might say.
Oh boy, Tannen Grace has gone to shave. Is what's happening right now. He's gone to shave. Yeah. So no. Again, this is a dance. It's a waltz between these two players here. Again, the Icelander mirror is. It's one thing to play the mirror in a game of draft. Let's say you've probably done it. If you've done draft for Uprising, you've probably seen or played the mirror, and it's not this complex. It's not this layered. There's usually a few intricate turns you have to navigate. This is honestly a choose-your-own-adventure book where every single one selection you choose puts you back to Chapter 1.
Yeah, it feels... And playing in this matchup sometimes feels this way too, especially when both players play for the end game of Frost Hexes. It can feel just incredibly daunting to try and figure out what play to make at what time. But both of these players, I'm sure, have played this matchup probably getting to this point, because don't forget, they are sitting in the semifinals. Whoever wins this game with Michael ahead on life right now is going to move into the finals of U.S. Nationals and could possibly become the next U.S. National Champion. And that's a huge thing. Thinking everything through is totally warranted.
And it would be nice for there to be a U.S. national champion who's actually an American citizen. That's an improvement for you guys.
What? I think that's gonna happen. Can you believe it?
I can believe it. So let me ask you this: in this case, knowing that there's no time limit on this matchup, Michael Hamilton in this match obviously is taking his time. It's a slow, grindier game, a lot on the line here. If he was playing this matchup in Swiss, would his strategy change, knowing that the clock is a factor?
To a certain degree, yeah, I think you do, and that's to his credit, to Michael's credit. And I think both players are taking their time and really making the right decisions and giving each other the grace to do so as well, because this is such an intricate matchup. But to his credit, Michael has the tools to speed the game up with giant attacks and go wide strategies of scars into certain matchups as well.
Do you think that those selections, things like Wounded Bill, Find Us Fighting Spirit, were those selections based on advantages in the mirror only, or are they surprise elements as well?
Oh, I think there's surprises for every matchup. I think you sit down to play an Icelander, you're like, sweet, let's take out the equipment that blocks because I don't really need it. Let's swap in the equipment that I can use that stops arcane damage, maybe something like Arcane Barrier 3, and oh, they're attacking me for 8. That's basically a quarter. Oh, they're playing something on my turn and shooting me in the face. Oh, no. That's, by the way, that's an actual description of an interview that I gave to someone who played against Michael earlier.
There you go. That's actually the leaked first page of the script from the Flesh and Blood Netflix series. Oh,
there you go.
Oh no! You're shooting me in the face.
Michael Hamilton killed me.
If it doesn't actually get off the ground, it's the writing, friends.
There it is.
E-Strike! Oh my goodness! New flavors.
See, I told you this is the benefit, and it's E-Strike for 7. This is the benefit of including these attacks. Is again, there's really no recourse outside of just throwing cards in front of this that Brian can play. And yes, he did have to like tuck a card and keep a card and play a 7. And yes, there are the capabilities for him to try and pay through Frostbites because of this. But Brian sits there and goes, okay, so do I still have the ability to just play off this Ice Eternal combo that I was trying to set up?
7 physical damage. Again, when you're playing in Icelander, you're almost never expecting anything like this, let alone something like Enlightened Strike. Enlightened Strike, an iconic card from Welcome to Wraith. It kind of fell out of favor in certain cases. It's seen a resurgence lately, a lot of the aggression. Even heroes such as Oldham, who have taken a more mid-range to aggression approach to how they play the game. Enlightened Strike has wheeled into a lot of lists, and here it is being exceptionally versatile again. And the surprise factor on it is pretty high as well.
I think it just speaks to the power level of the card, right? From the very first set ever released, it's one of the most iconic cards in the game, and one that can be used by literally every hero. And that's what's wonderful about it, is it makes its way into lists. Really, at any point, you can really just throw it in your list and see how it plays. He's going to pop the E-Pot for 2 in response, gain 2 resources.
I feel like cards that have that kind of versatility, first of all, it does a lot. It costs quote-unquote zero. And I'm not saying it doesn't cost anything in the sense that you have to tuck a card, but there's a lot of cards that will do things for it, such as Razor Reflex, and that will
Sure.
Nimbleism, etc. So it falls under that category, but it's also versatile in terms of how you want to use it. Do you want to go wide? Do you want to go tall? Do you want to replenish a hand? There's many opportunities.
And this is a huge play. This is the play that he was setting up last turn, and he's even going so far as to Metacarpus node this. So he cracked both E-Pots, gaining 4 resources, pitched 2 blues, pushed this number to 10, and he's representing double X equals 10, so X equals 5 Frostbites, 5 arcane damage, and he's going to stack up one of those Amulets of Ice first on top of the Metacarpus node trigger, which would push the arcane damage side of things for Ice Eternal to 6, making it out of range and always guaranteed to deal some amount of damage to Michael.
Is this the first major salvo we're seeing from Brian Lorenz? Is this the major shift in tempo that perhaps starts dictating a resolution to this game?
Yeah, this is how he planned to pivot tempo. Now, he's doing all of this in response to Enlighten Strike for 7. So most likely what he's saying is I'm probably going to chuck like this Channel Lake Frigid, for example, in front of that, but I'm going to take damage. But you are also going to take damage. And not only are you going to take damage, you have no way to stop the Frostbites from hitting you for serious amounts. And not only that, you're also going to be dealing a serious amount of arcane damage as well. So this is representing, if he has 1 resource floating and he can stop 1 arcane, this is representing a bunch of damage.
And all off the back of those key cards. Again, Icelander Specialization.
Yeah, this is, I think, representing currently like 15 damage before you Waning Moon, if the math adds up. Because Ice Eternal is going to create X number of Frostbites, and also if you fuse it, deal damage equal to the number of Frostbites that they control. And you could even do some other kind of weird things, like maybe pop Stormstriders, play another ice card if you have the resources for it.
You could eat spaghetti out of like a trumpet. That's pretty weird.
You could eat spaghetti out of a trumpet. Probably not at the venue.
No, they don't have that vendor here. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. The tuba of Go again. That we just heard that. We got that message from from productions. I'm glad people are listening to us.
Right now, people at home are like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, you tune in and you hear
Flake and Armada.
Yeah, they're
all
like,
right, mute stream. Let's just watch it ourselves.
Longest game of the day, and we get these 2 clown shoes over here.
He is going to do it. He's going to Stormstriders and maybe play that Ice Bolt. That was my thought. That maybe by doing this, he adds another up. Yep, he's going to do it. He's going to play the Ice Bolt. Yep, adds another Frostbite on top of all of this, which pushes it to 6, and I think that represents lethal. No, he doesn't have the resources for the Waning Moon.
So if there's an E-Pot on Michael Hamilton's side here, so if he's calculating, and if this is something like 20 to 21 damage, he could crack the E-Pot in response to the Frostbite. Use the 2 resources to perhaps AB what matters most?
I think he has to at this stage, is to, and he's going to let the Frostbite resolve. I think he has to crack the E-Pot to stop the Frostbite from being there to gain the resource. So he paid the 1 resource to get rid of the Frostbite, crack the E-Pot, gain 2 resources, and then he's going to probably just AB some Ice Bolt shenanigans here.
I'm telling you, cue Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with that whole, that wall of just he's kind of like losing his mind, the conspiracy theory meme and stuff like that. If anyone's out there, this is basically the kind of math that both of these players are trying to do to figure out where the lethal is. And keep in mind, there's still an E-Strike that basically kicked off this whole shenanigan.
Yeah, and there's the block with the Cornet Peak, so he is going to take 5 himself. But then these 5 Frostbites are each going to deal 1 for every Frost Hex. So this represents 10 damage, dropping Michael to 3.
So on Michael's side, he just took a beating here, which was everything up to this point. 53 minutes led up to this where Brian just absolutely went ham here. However, he's given up a lot of pieces. The Metacarpus nodes are still there, but there's no more Stormstriders, so that burst potential is no longer there. Brian Lorenz at 11, Michael Hamilton at 3. How does Michael Hamilton approach this to perhaps even close that out on his own side?
Well, the fact that Brian's not going to have an arsenal here means he can't easily play on his opponent's turn really at all. And in doing so, he has the capability of maybe just keeping this hand E-strike into like E-strike? Something to that effect on his own turn.
Right, because there's no opportunity to play at instant speed here.
Correct, which means you don't have to factor in Waning Moon. I mean, what he could draw that could allow him to play, I don't think there's anything he can draw that allows him to play at instant speed. He could draw on some defense reactions, I guess, like if he has the sinks in the deck, but there's really no damage that he has to account for on his own turn, so he's going to let him draw.
But E-strike into E-strike leaves Michael with no arsenal.
This is true.
So he is going to go with the E-strike, perhaps opting to go with the go again to maybe follow that up with something. We're going to find out here. He is going with the 5. It's likely going to be the go again. Now, depending on how Brian actually approaches this, 5, if he tanks this, goes down to 6, maybe Michael Hamilton...
If he tanks this and goes to 6, then he puts himself in easy lethal range because 6 can be reached in a variety of ways, particularly 5.
And only one Arcane Barrier left.
That's right. Like, at this point, you're at AB1 because you popped the Storm Striders, which is incredibly dangerous territory. And Michael, even though he's sitting at 3, if he can somehow present a lot of damage here... Oh, is this an Oasis Respite?
He might actually just be floating the resource, maybe to throw the Tunic at it.
Yeah, I believe so. So if he can present, amount of damage that Brian has to take some of, arsenal a card, and then play for maybe some sort of a fused effect, he might be able to just get there.
That is the Findale Spring Tunic that is being thrown in. Again, one block, but the resource that was on it before the block was done at instant speed, floating that one resource, the go again. It is an E-strike into an E-strike. That's a 7, so no arsenal for Michael Hamilton. That's got to be significant here.
Right, but this is also demanding some response. I mean, technically, yes, you could take this down to 3, but I don't think you ever want to be at 3 against a wizard. That's literally your turn, Waning Moon, you're dead. Yes, and that Metacarpus node, they're wondering if that had been destroyed or not, most likely, but that Arcane Barrier apparently is still up. Nevertheless, you never want to go to 3, so here he's going to give him 2-card block, which means his turn's basically just going to be Arsenal Pass, which opens Michael up to a Storm Strider's possibility, going to 9.
This is going to be pretty greasy, Steven. Again, the card that's in Arsenal for Brian Lorenz is a blue Ice Bolt. That's pretty big indeed, and again, it's going to all be about who blinks first, who has priority, who can respond to what.
Yeah, it is definitely one of those... let's just put it, it's a scary scenario. And I'm not sure, based on these cards that you've drawn as Michael, I don't think you play for a Storm Strider's play because you're not presenting a lethal. I think based on these cards, you don't have like a big Aether Ice Vein. You've got the blue, and you're going to want these cards to pitch because Ice Bolt, like you can put your opponent on a variety of blue cards that can deal you damage, because at this point you can't Storm Strider, so like that freezing point is locked in the hand. It's not coming out on your opponent's turn. So you can put them to like 6 damage as the cap, and you have Aether Ice Vein on your turn. You float 2 to be able to stop any counterplay.
So we're showing the Frost Text. We're going to fuse the red Aether Ice Vein. That's going to be 5 arcane damage with the fusion. Again, on hit, you have to discard or pay 2. There is no way for Brian Lorenz to block this. He can block 1 with Arcane Barrier. I'm looking at his list right now. He does run 3 Oasis Respites. There's none in the hand, though. So this is going to be a tough pill to swallow. It's not going to kill him, but it's going to make it very difficult.
Well, I think what we're going to see is Brian considering whether or not he wants to play for the lethal here, because he technically can present 3 twice. He can pitch 2 blues, play Ice Bolt into Waning Moon, and if the one card that was not revealed by Michael is not a blue, then I think you win on the spot. But if it's 2 blue cards in general, then they can AB3 twice, and you still have to give up cards, including the rest of your hand, because he's probably going to Amulet of Ice you.
A very critical juncture in this game. We saw how slow-paced it was early on, but suddenly, in a blink of an eye, it went from the 20s all the way down to 9-3 in favor of Brian Lorenz. Brian Lorenz is it's not his turn, but he might actually be able to win on Michael Hamilton's turn here, presenting the Ice Bolt from Arsenal using the Icelander ability with the Metacarpus nodes as the kicker to this one. And Frostbite token is the extra sprinkles on this play.
So he's asking him if he wants to let the Frostbite token resolve or if there's any responses from Michael Hamilton. I don't think there can be any responses in this position. I think because you have 2 ice blue cards, you're comfortable being alive and pitching those away to slot those as Arcane Barrier. So you probably let this Frostbite resolve, and it would threaten 2 damage by itself. You can't really consider ever letting it leak. Maybe this just presents a lethal he can't stop, though, because the Frostbite does represent the 1/1 off of the Frost Hex. So in a way, this is presenting another Squeaky Lethal.
Squeaky Lethal that's another name of a sick band.
Yeah, Squeaky Lethal.
Armada and Flake and the Squeaky Lethals. Next time someone asks me how I'm doing, I'm going to say I'm just comfortable being alive.
There you go.
That's pretty good. So again, for those who want to recap here, Michael Hamilton is presenting the red fused Aether Ice Vein. The response from Brian Lorenz has been the blue Ice Bolt with the Metacarpus Node Kicker and the trigger of the Icelander ability to create the Frostbite. There is an option here for Michael Hamilton to respond. So again, it's just this game of broken telephone back and forth, but ultimately there will be a very significant resolution to this turn.
And here he has an Amulet of Ice in response to that before we get back to the resolves, and he's going to drop the freezing point from hand to meet that Amulet of Ice. Still waiting to see if that Frostbite resolves. This is like almost a checkmate scenario for Brian, because what he's saying is, okay, look, I'm presenting 4 damage instead of 3. He's going to use the Eluvian Constellus to make the next thing 3 less. He has to clear this Frostbite. He also has to Arcane Barrier as much as he can for this and the follow-up Waning Moon, because if the Frostbite stays up, it represents 2 damage. This is currently, if he pays into that Metacarpus node, which it looks like he is going to pay into it, that represents 4 damage. And then the Waning Moon represents 3 damage. So there's a variety of different ways that he can present lethal, and Michael has to do the mental gymnastics to try and figure out how to not die.
There's a lot of intricate calculations, finding the correct line. One wrong turn here, my friend, and you're not in Kansas anymore. So
he's going to Arcane Barrier 3 here, leaving him taking 1, going to 2.
This is a quick match. Look, we've only been a minute and 20 into this one.
Wow, they have just blown through this. Now we've gotten back to the point where we are resolving this Aether Ice Vein. 4/5 and a Frostbite on Michael Hamilton's side is technically threatening lethal here. So is the Waning Moon threatening lethal here.
What an incredible game between these two. We'll call them the Metacarpus Bros.
There you go. You'll love to see this. Now, this is the sticking point, and I don't know if Michael can get out of this one. He's being presented lethal over the top for 1. So this is for 3. He's at 2. He has to stop he has to stop 2 and go to 1, and then he has to float that 1 resource and pay for the Frostbite so that it doesn't kill him.
Lots going on over here. Again, as things start resolving, it gets very complicated early, but as the layers of the stack get resolved, the picture becomes clearer. Brian Lorenz down to 5 here. Michael Hamilton's pitching away. The Waning Moon is going to be pitched through, again, based off the discount from the Eluvian Constellus, paying through the Frostbite as well. 2 damage. 2 damage from the Waning Moon.
And now, because they've resolved in this way, and Michael has avoided that very sticky trap of all of the different ways that he could have died, he's going to draw into a 4-card hand with his boots still up, and his opponent has nothing in his hand to stop arcane damage. So literally he just has to boots in anything that deals 3, and that's the game.
Oh my goodness.
The most crazy finish. I'm just going to stay in this reclined position. I'm going to be here in this position.